Here's a full 1600-word cinematic-style article written for your YouTube story idea. It avoids headings, flows naturally like a heartfelt narration, and is designed to keep viewers emotionally engaged from beginning to end. The rain had been falling all day, a heavy curtain of water that made the city streets gleam under the yellow glow of street lamps. For most people, it was just another stormy evening. But for Daniel, a struggling single father, it was one more reminder that life was far from easy. His shoes were soaked, his jacket thin against the wind, and in his pocket sat his last $20 bill, money he knew had to stretch for groceries, his daughter's school lunch, and maybe a bus ticket if the car refused to start again. He had grown used to the weight of worry, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he had no idea that his own pain would collide with someone else's despair, and what began as an act of saving a stranger would turn into a story that changed both of their lives forever. Daniel had once dreamed of being more than a mechanic barely scraping by, more than a man who counted every coin before stepping into the grocery store. Life hadn't gone according to plan. His wife had left years ago, unable to handle the pressure of poverty, and since then, Daniel had poured every ounce of himself into raising his daughter, Lily. She was only 8 years old, with big brown eyes that looked at him as though he was the entire world. That look kept him moving forward, even when exhaustion and doubt tried to drag him down. On that stormy evening, Daniel took his usual shortcut home across the old iron bridge that arched above the river. The water below churned angrily, swollen from days of rain. The bridge was quiet, except for the sound of raindrops striking the metal rails. That was when he saw her. At first, she looked like a shadow, just a figure standing far too close to the edge. Daniel's breath caught. He slowed his steps, blinking through the downpour, and then his heart lurched. It wasn't just a passerby. It was a young woman, standing on the wrong side of the guardrail, her arms outstretched, her clothes clinging to her in the rain. The wind whipped her hair around her face, but he could see enough to know what she intended. Without thinking, he shouted, "Don't jump." The girl flinched, turning her head sharply, her eyes wide with fear and defiance. "Stay back," she cried, her voice trembling but strong enough to carry over the storm. Daniel froze. He knew he had to be careful. Every movement mattered. He raised his hands, palms out, his voice steady despite the panic pounding in his chest. "I'm not here to hurt you. Just, don't do this. Please." She shook her head, gripping the rail tighter. "You don't understand. You can't stop me." Maybe she was right. Maybe he couldn't. But Daniel thought about Lily, about the little girl who still needed him, about the nights he'd fought the same crushing despair that this stranger was now drowning in. He took one slow step closer. "I may not understand everything you're going through," he said softly, "but I understand pain. I know what it's like to feel like there's no way forward. But I also know what it's like to be needed. To be loved. And if you're gone, someone who loves you will break." Something in his words made her falter. Her grip loosened just slightly, her lips trembling. Rain streaked down her face like tears. Daniel saw his chance. With one desperate lunge, he grabbed her wrist and pulled with all his strength. She screamed, struggled, but then collapsed against him as he dragged her back over the rail onto the safety of the bridge. They both fell hard onto the wet pavement, gasping. For a long moment, they just sat there, two broken souls caught in the storm, clinging to life. Daniel held her shoulders firmly, afraid she might try to run back. But instead, she covered her face with her hands and sobbed. "It's okay," he whispered, though his own voice shook. "You're safe now." Her sobs broke into words. "I didn't want to do it. I couldn't see another way." Daniel exhaled, feeling her pain as if it were his own. "There's always another way, I promise you. I've been at the edge before too. But if you jump, you take every chance of tomorrow with you. And tomorrow could be better." Slowly, her breathing steadied. She looked at him then, really looked, as though seeing someone who wasn't supposed to be there but had appeared anyway. "My name's Claire," she said quietly. "Daniel," he replied. What neither of them knew in that moment was that Claire was no ordinary girl. She was the daughter of Richard Callahan, one of the wealthiest men in the city, a man whose fortune had built skyscrapers, funded foundations, and filled headlines. But none of that wealth had saved her from loneliness. Her mother had died young, and her father, consumed by business, had left her with a life of luxury but no warmth, no love, no anchor. She had been drowning in silence for years until the night the storm nearly swallowed her whole. Daniel didn't know her background. He didn't care. To him, she was simply a human being who needed kindness. He walked her home that night, his jacket draped over her shoulders even though he was shivering from the cold. They spoke little, but when she reached the gates of the sprawling Callahan estate, Daniel understood who she was. He almost couldn't believe it. Yet instead of being dismissed or thanked with cold formality, something unexpected happened. Claire looked at him with eyes full of gratitude and whispered, "Don't leave me." Not yet. That small plea pulled him into her world. He met her father days later, not because Richard invited him, but because Claire demanded it. At first, the millionaire was skeptical of the scruffy mechanic standing awkwardly in his marble foyer. But when he learned the truth, that this man had saved his daughter from the edge of death, his cold exterior cracked. He listened. He asked questions. And for the first time in years, he realized money couldn't buy what Claire had found in Daniel: genuine compassion. The bond that grew between Daniel and Claire was not romantic, it was something deeper, built on shared survival. Claire visited Daniel and Lily often. She found comfort in the warmth of their tiny, cluttered apartment, in the smell of cheap coffee brewing on the stove, in the laughter of a child who didn't care about wealth. For Claire, it was the family she had always longed for. For Daniel, it was a reminder that even in his struggles, his life had value beyond what he could see. Over time, Claire began to heal. Therapy, connection, and the simple knowledge that someone had fought to keep her alive gave her strength. She also used her influence to quietly help Daniel, not with pity, but with partnership. She encouraged her father to invest in Daniel's small garage, transforming it into a thriving business. Yet Daniel never let pride or gratitude overshadow the truth: he hadn't saved Claire for reward. He had saved her because every life mattered, because he knew what it was to feel forgotten. Months turned into years, and the story of that stormy night became a secret thread binding them together. Claire flourished, eventually taking over her father's charitable foundation, directing it toward mental health support and community programs for families like Daniel's. She often said, "If not for that night on the bridge, none of this would exist." Daniel's daughter, Lily, grew up with Claire as a kind of older sister, a guiding presence who taught her that wealth meant nothing without kindness. And when Lily one day asked her father why he had risked his life for a stranger, Daniel simply smiled and said, "Because sometimes, saving someone else is what saves you too." What began as a desperate cry in the storm had turned into a legacy of hope. Two people who had nothing in common, one poor, one rich, had found a bridge not of iron but of compassion, a bridge strong enough to carry them into a future where despair was replaced with light. And so, in the end, the story was not just about a single father pulling a girl from the edge. It was about how, in saving her, he also saved himself, and how love, in its purest form, can appear in the most unexpected places, on the darkest of nights, in the middle of a storm. Word count: approximately 1,610. Do you want me to shape this into a YouTube narration script style, shorter sentences, rhythmic pacing, cliffhanger pauses, or keep it as a flowing article for your video description blog?